Hello guys, and welcome back to part 3 of my Homefront card review series. So Homefront is the newest expansion coming to Cards, coming out November 27th, so tomorrow, probably about 18 to 20 hours from the point of recording. And I'm just going to be plowing through a whole bunch of more cards to review here, trying to get out all of the card reviews before the expansion drops. So this video you'll probably be seeing sometime around midnight European time, and then the next video I will release probably tomorrow morning. The expansion might be out already, might be right before the expansion drops. I don't know exactly when it's going to come out. But that's when you can expect the videos, and then I'll have a video, a hopefully shorter video, talking about the balance patch that's coming out alongside the expansion, and that will be dropping probably sometime tomorrow or maybe on Friday. But anyways, let's jump into the cards we have to review here, and something that I want to mention again is that normally I have I get given a couple cards to reveal on my channel that are unique to this channel. You get to see them here first. I've been doing that for several years now. Unfortunately, did not get one this time around. I run some questions about that. So none of these are unique reveals. All of these have been revealed already, either on other people's channels or in the main Discord. But you do get to see my not my first reaction to the cards, because I've seen these before, but you get to hear my first time expressing my opinions on these cards, because these ones I have not covered in any other videos. Unfortunately, my time schedule didn't really line up with Bear and Core, so I couldn't join them for the rest of the parts over on Bear's channel. So this is the first time that you guys get to hear how I feel about some of these cards, and let me tell you, the average power... I still think the best card of the expansion was in Part 2, the British Elite, but the average power level of these cards is a little bit higher than the average power level of the cards that we looked at in Part 2. So let's jump straight into them, starting off with the 27th Fuseliers. So this is a 2-credit 2/4 infantry for Germany. Limited rarity, again. 2/4 infantry, it seems to be the new standard. This one does have bond, however, it also has a shock. So the shock kind of makes up for the bond. And then it has the text with the passive effect of when a German unit enters your hand, reduce its cost by 1 to a minimum of 1. Now, enters your hand means a few different things. So enters your hand could mean when you draw a German unit from your deck. It could also mean when you retreat a German unit from the battlefield into your hand. Obviously, we've seen a lot of German retreat your own unit to hand type cards. And it could also mean if you play something like, say, Blitz Doctrine, which is rotated, thankfully, but like if you were playing in Classic and you say play Blitz Doctrine, or in Standard you play Africa Corps, and then you pick a German unit to add to your hand, upon entering your hand, it will have its cost reduced by 1. So there's a lot of different ways to trigger this. So this is essentially give you a 1-credit discount if you can do any of these things while this is on the board. And it's going to stick around for a while. Like a 2-credit 2/4, if you play this on turn 2, there's a decent chance that this is going to stick around for at least a turn. And then if you're playing a unit-heavy deck, that's probably a pretty decent chance of triggering at least once on the draw that you get on turn 3. Now, that being said, I just don't see the vision for this card, I suppose. Just because, like, you don't want to be wasting your credits generating cards, or you don't want to be wasting your credits drawing cards early to then have them be discounted later, because you're just going to lose the tempo that you spend drawing cards. So I just don't see a way to not lose a lot of tempo to get value off of this, and if you're losing a lot of tempo to get value off of this, it kind of negates the value you get off of this. Because, like, the value you get off of this is basically tempo down the line, but you're wasting current tempo to get tempo down the line, and as a general rule, that is typically bad unless it is incredibly overpowered. And I don't think this is incredibly overpowered. This is just like an all-right card. You know, the shock is good, so like, I'm not saying it's not going to see play. Like, you could just pick this in a slightly slower German deck, and you play this on turn 2. If you ever make a German deck where they need things to play on turn 2 other than War Machine, you could do 27 Fusiliers, you take the 1 damage, you play it onto the board, And then on turn 2, or on turn 3, you, like, kill one of your opponent's units with the shock on this, and then also you reduce the cost of, like, your 6-cost unit to a 5-cost unit, which is going to help out your curve a little bit down the line. And, like, that's fine. But yeah, I don't have high hopes for this card, but it has a possibility of seeing play. Obviously, anything that can reduce the cost of cards can see play. The other way I could see this is if you're playing like a Heinz deck and you use this as just a cheap, high-statted unit to play down. It triggers 35 Ts, and then you like try to hit an Enigma to draw like 5 or 6 cards while this is on the board, and then like all of those 1-cost German tanks you draw become 0-cost, and then you can like flood them out. But as we will be seeing at some point, there is a probably better way of accomplishing a similar effect in a Heinz deck. So yeah, all around, not a terrible card, but not too great. Then we have the Panzer 4J. So the Panzer 4J is a 6-credit 4/5 tank, limited rarity for Germany, 0 operation cost, and blitz. And then it has the added text, increase the operation cost by 1 after each time this unit attacks. So this has the Zerstorer card text, basically. And if you know your tanks in cards, there's the Panzer 3J, which is a 4-credit 4/5 blitz tank with 2 operation costs. So it costs 8 in total to hit something in the support line. This costs 6 to hit something in the support line with a 4/5 blitz tank the first time, and then it costs 1 extra credit the second time, and then it's the same as the Panzer 3J the third time, and then it costs 1 more credit the fourth time. And let me tell you, you are not attacking with this tank 4 times. That is never, ever, ever going to happen. So basically, this is a better Panzer 3J. The Panzer 3J, however, sucks. It is literally never seen play other than being picked off Blitz Doctrine. So this is a lot better than a absolutely abysmally terrible card. So where does that leave us in terms of how good is this card? And I think the answer is, if Blitz Doctrine was still in Standard, I think you would be happy picking this card off Blitz Doctrine fairly regularly. I think it's just a little too expensive for a Heinz deck. I feel like you're just not really wanting to play 1 unit on 6 credits, and I don't think you really even want to play a card that requires getting to turn 6 to play it in the first place in a Heinz deck. So I think the place where it's more likely to see play is like a mid-range deck where you're just you're playing some more 5 and 6 cost units, and maybe you just want a unit that is able to come down and trade something immediately, or come down and hit the HQ for 4 immediately. I'm just not convinced that, like, why wouldn't you just play like Panzer Grenadier, where you can play it out a turn earlier, and then you hit them for 4 like the next turn, or you can play it out and then hit them for 4 for 8 credits, which is obviously 2 credits more, but it's much more flexible. So yeah, I don't know. This is just a fine card. Obviously, it's going to be a good pickup in draft. Then we get to another German card. This is a countermeasure, a 1-cost countermeasure, with the text, when a friendly unit is attacked, send it to hand before damage. So, Britain had a countermeasure Merchant Navy, which was when an enemy unit attacks, retreat it. So that didn't see any play. But, in theory, that card is infinitely better than this. This card absolutely sucks. This is like, retreating your own units is not good 95% of the time. Most of the cards that retreat your own stuff that we have seen so far are abysmal in this expansion. The only exception is Kettenkrad is very, very good. And the 4-cost 2/3 is good because you don't have to retreat your own unit. And most of the time, if you do play that card, you will be retreating the enemy unit. Tactical retreat is just awful. Like, there's specific use cases, I suppose, where, I don't know, you play like a Henschel, and then you destroy something with the Henschel's deployment effect, and then you just hold up tactical retreat, and you have no other units, and you're like, well, I want to get my Henschel deployment effect again, and I don't want them, like, trading it off, but it doesn't, like, they could just kill it with an order, and then this doesn't do anything. Or they don't attack it, because they're, like, whatever, and then you wasted a credit on tactical retreat. This card is just so difficult to control what unit gets retreated And then if you do set up a situation where you have a specific unit to be retreated, they can just not trigger the countermeasure by either not attacking it or killing it with a counter or with an order or a deployment effect. And then also there's like some situations where like you're going to have to hold this up and be like, well, they probably hit this one first. And then it returns to my hand, but then they like kill that with an order, then they hit the thing that you didn't want to retreat for a massive tempo loss. Like this is like this might be the worst countermeasure they have ever retreated, or have ever printed. Obviously, there's like, you can think of niche situations where you're like, I have a Panzer Grenadier on board, they're on 4 health, they try to trade off the Panzer Grenadier, I get it back to hand, and then the next turn I replay it, get the 4-4 35T, trade off the front line with the Panzer Gren, and then hit them for 4, and I won the game because of tactical retreat. And it's like, sure, that technically could happen. Yeah, this card sucks. Then we get the RM Bersaglieri. I'm probably butchering that. Apologies to all of the Italians. Bersaglieri. It is a Navy card. You can tell because it has the RM prefix at the beginning. And it is, obviously it's Italian, and it's a 1-credit order. Draw a card from your deck that did not start there. Give your HQ defense equal to its cost. So 1-credit draw card is good. 1-credit draw card is typically good. You like, obviously it depends a lot on what else it's doing. Ideally for most decks, unless you're a combo deck, but 1-credit draw card is good. This is 1-credit draw card, gain HQ defense, and like let's say like the average card is 4 cost. 1-credit draw card, gain 4 HQ defense is an incredible card. Now, obviously, that is not what this card says. This card is not draw a card, gain HQ defense equal to its cost. It's draw a card in your deck that did not start there. And that's very, very different, because there's not a lot of ways to add cards to your deck. Now, one you might immediately think of is Airstrips, the card Italy got in Air Supremacy, which is add a Roma to your hand and a the bomber to the top of your deck, or is it? No, it's add the bomber to your hand and add the Roma to the top of your deck, I think. So you immediately add a 4-cost card to the top of your deck that did not start there, and then you can play this in the same turn, and it's 1 credit, draw that card, and you gain 4 HQ. So it's, that's fine. It is a 2-cost combo that has to be saved together, because otherwise the RM Bersaglieri is not useful. But 1939 knows what they're doing some of the time. And in this case, this card is very, very clearly printed with other cards Italy is getting from this expansion in mind. And it's kind of difficult to review this card without looking at those, so let's take a look at those next. And those cards that we are going to be looking at is the 5th Bersaglieri and the 9th Bersaglieri, and both of them generate the 18th Bersaglieri. And if you are tired of hearing me probably butcher this name, I'm tired of saying it. So we're just going to call it, I don't know what we're going to call it. We're just going to call them by the numbers for now on. So the 5th and the 9th are cards you can play in your deck. They are cards in your collection that you put into your deck. The 5th is a limited, and the 9th is a special. Now, the one in the middle here, the 18th, is not a collectible card. This is not a card in your collection. This is not a card you can put into your deck. This is a card that is exclusively generated off of these other 2 cards, and it's clearly intended to be used with this card to shuffle a 6-cost big guy into your deck, and then you draw the 6-cost big guy while healing 6. It's a pretty powerful package, but let's take a look at the cards to understand how powerful this package actually is. So, starting with the 5th. The 5th is a 4-credit 5/6 infantry guard with 2 operation costs. So, 4-credit 5/6 is the base stat line for an infantry. That would be sort of 1 operation cost. 5/6, 6/6 is kind of the default. This is 2 operation costs, but it has guard. So that is obviously, you'll take an operation cost for a guard on an infantry. But it also has bond. And this is bond on Italy, which means you have to have an Italian unit on board at the start of your turn to avoid taking damage from this, which is a lot harder than bond on the major nation cards. So, okay, 4-credit 5/6 guard with bond. Probably not that good. probably not going to see any play. Destruction. Shuffle an 18th into your deck. Now, before we take a look at the 18th, let's take a look at the 9th. So that's the card on the far right of the screen here that I'm kind of covering with my thing, but you're just missing more Bersaglieri text. So the 9th is a 3-credit 5/4 infantry. Now, this is, for 3 credits, you're looking at like 4/4 is the typical stat line. So 5/4 is already better than average stat line. With Blitz, so that's incredible. A 3-credit 5/4 Blitz is pretty good. With Bond, obviously, to make up for the fact that a 3-credit 5/4 with Blitz is really, really powerful, unless you're Britain, in which case that's just your standard elite, apparently. Now, this has also Destruction, Shuffle an 18th into your deck. So the 5th is a bit of a defensive tool. It's a big guard. And the 9th could be used aggressively. It could also just be used as a way to trade out large units relatively early on into the game. They both have Bond. They're both Italian, so if you can stick the 5th, then you can play the 9th without triggering the Bond on the 9th. And then if they both die, or one of them dies, they shuffle the 18th into your deck. So now, what is the 18th? What is the big payoff card? It is a 6-credit 6/8 infantry, so this is probably about right, with Blitz and Guard and Bond. So you're basically just combining the keywords from both of these guys onto a single unit, and also it's very, very big. It is a 6-credit 6/8 Blitz Guard. So it's the same total number of stats as the Grenadier Guards, which is a 5/9. This is a 6/8, same stat total. However, and they both have Guard. However, this one has Blitz on top of that, but it also has Bond. And this is coming to the issue with this package. Because you're probably taking the 1 fatigue damage on the first guy you play. And you're probably taking 2 fatigue damage on the second guy you play. And then you play the 18th, and because the first guys have to die for the 18th, at least one of them has to die for the 18th to go into your deck, you're probably not having any Italian units left on board for when you play the 18th, so then you're drawing into 3 fatigue, and that's assuming you have not played any other Bond cards. And at that point, you've taken 6, you've dealt 6 damage to yourself. And then if we go back to the RM, you can use this to fish out the 18th, to heal back the 6 damage you're dealing to yourself. But then it's just is the payoff worth it? And a 6-credit 6/8 Blitz Guard is obviously very good. But it's not game-winningly good. That's just above rate. If 6-credit 6/8 Guard was just a printed card, obviously you would probably play that in a variety of Italian control decks. But, are you playing so many other cards that require drawing multiple cards and then killing them and not being suppressed to stop the destruction effect? And then you're dealing damage to yourself with the hopes that you will then heal back that damage at a later point. All for that? Probably not. And then also the 18th has the added destruction, or it has a deployment effect of shuffling in a 9th back into your deck, and the 9th is the one on the right hand of the screen. So even if you started with the 5th, and it dies, and you get the 18th, the 18th will then shuffle a 9th back into your deck, even if the 9th didn't start in your deck. And that probably makes your deck worse, because, after the first or second, depending on how many of these cards you run, you're going to have a lot of 18ths in the deck. And you don't really want the 18th to be shuffling more Italian Bond cards into your deck, because these all happen, one at a time. So you very rarely go to stop the Italian Bond. So now you're taking 6 damage, but you're healing that 6 damage back in theory if you use the RM. But now you're shuffling a 3-credit 5/4 into your deck that's Blitz, 3-credit 5/4 Blitz, good. Bond 4 damage, bad. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like you're taking too much damage and you're not getting nearly enough out of this package. It's fun. It's not awful. You could definitely play this at lower ranks. You could have Field Marshal with this type of deck. There's some fun things to try around with this. But all in all, I don't think this is particularly competitive. I feel like you'd just rather play Attack of the Colonies, Dagger Strikes, Machi, and Italy just doesn't have a shortage of if these were Polish cards, it would still suck, but you'd try it out more at least. But like, Italy just has really good control cards, and they don't have to be running this like really jank package. But it's interesting. It's cool design space. These are interesting, well-designed cards. Let's get to a card that is not interesting or well-designed, and that is Decoy Tactics. It is a Finnish card, a 3-credit order for Finland. Give a unit ambush, shock, and the enemy discards a random card when they target or attack this unit. This card is absolutely disgusting. I'm not necessarily saying that this card is amazing, because it's 3 credits, it's a decent chunk of credit sink, and it also requires you to have a unit on board that your opponent is going to attack, or target. And obviously, like, if you just have, like, a guard unit, that's good. So, let's break this down. So, what is discarding a card costed at? Discarding a card is cost at about 2 credits. If you look at, like, U375, it's probably cost, like, a little bit higher than that, because U375 is 5 or less. So, discarding a credit is cost at, like, around 2.5 credits. How much is giving a unit shock costed at? Probably, like, 0.5. How much is giving a unit ambush cost at? Probably 0.5. Okay, so if you combine all of the like individual parts of this card together, the total value of this card, assuming that this discards, if this card was just give a unit ambush and shock, the enemy discards a card, which obviously it's not. The total value of this card is around 3.5. Now, when you are adding together different values of different costing amounts together into a single card, you have to take into account the fact that you are getting all of this for a single card. So then you have to start to factor in the fact that like it's effectively like drawing those other cards if you played it all on the same effect, so then that adds on like an additional effect. So if this was give a unit ambush and shock, you'd the enemy discards a card, you'd probably expect it to be fairly costed around 4, but it's Finnish, and also that card would kind of suck, so then you do expect it to be cost around 3. So 3 credits, the enemy discards a card, give a unit ambush and shock. Okay. Fair enough. But that's not what this card says. It does not say the enemy discards a card. It's give a unit, the enemy discards a card when they target or attack it. Now, if you play, say, a Finnish boys, the 2/7 guard for Finland, you know, that guy is really good. He sees a lot of play. Now, if you play that on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you play Decoy Tactics on it, it does not matter if the opponent plays a raiding brigade, or they kill it, or they just suppress it with a suppression, or if they remove it with an amphibious assault, or a what's the other Japanese 3-credit destroy unit with less attack than health that sees a ton of play these days. They did command failure. They destroy with a command failure. They destroy with whatever. It does not matter. Like, there's basically zero way to get around. If you give a guard unit this effect, your opponent is discarding at least 1 card. On top of having to deal now with a ambush shock guard. Okay, but it doesn't have to be like a German-Finland deck. You could play this in Soviets. Do turn 2 Bryansk Irregulars, turn 3 Decoy Tactics on the Bryansk Irregulars. Like, this card is absolutely disgusting, because even if you don't use the ambush and the shock, it is basically just 3 credits, your opponent discards a card, which isn't terrible. And that's like, if they can answer it immediately. But what happens if you're playing, like, say, a Britain-Finland deck, and you do turn 6 Grenadier Guards, turn 7 Decoy Tactics on your Grenadier Guards? What is your opponent going to do? Like, maybe they have, like, a Kyoto Regiment, and then they only discard 1 card. Maybe. But also, maybe they have to double surprise attack this, and then they discard 2 cards. Or maybe they have to triple trade into it, and then they discard 3 cards. And then suddenly you're playing a standard 3 credits buff your unit, give it ambush, and you're like almost always wanting to play this on a guard, so you're giving a guard unit ambush, and then your opponent discards 3 cards. Like, that is back-breaking. It's just like the German elite, the 169th Grenadier, where it's some of the time it's going to do nothing, and some of the time it's going to absolutely ruin your opponent's day. And that is not a fun design space. That's not an interesting design space. That's not a clever design space. That is very, very boring. And it is very unfun. And it's going to be fun for the person playing this card for like the first couple times, but after a while, you're just going to get kind of bad at it yourself because you're like, sometimes you play it and then your opponent has a way to ignore the unit, or they discard one card and then kill you. Because you know, 3 credits to do this is a tempo loss. It's a rather substantial tempo loss. So if your opponent isn't forced to discard a lot of cards, or like you're not able to sort of get over the hump with like a board clear, to stop them from just killing you on board where they don't care if you discard their hand. Like, this, why? And they've been so good with a lot of other effects, in particularly naval warfare, where a lot of the other effects, and I said this about the 169th as well, is in naval warfare they did a really good job of putting once per turn on a lot of cards. They just seem to have forgotten that in Homefront, because 169th isn't once per turn. This isn't once per turn. Like, once per turn is still, like, an incredibly good card, but like this just means that like there's situations where like you just like get this down on like you'd play like Armored Train Decoy Tactics, and then your opponent just loses their entire hand. Like, it's just over. Like, they wait until they draw the exact card that lets them only discard one card. Yeah, this is disgusting, and I hate this because there's a lot of like interesting things you can be doing. Like, just go back one page. You could be doing like weird self-damage bond, play tons of Bersaglieris in like an Italian deck, or you know, you can be doing the like bond aggro Britain stuff. You can be doing the Japanese control stuff, and like, you know, I'm gonna like queue up on the day the expansion drops. I'm gonna open up the stream, queue up my first game, and my first opponent's gonna just be playing like German Finland with Decoy Tactics being their only new card, and I'm gonna get like 4 for 1 by their 3-cost standard order. Yep. Stupid card, stupid design. Why did they print this? And again, I don't think this is gonna be like meta breaking, but it's gonna be like a hard counter to certain decks, and you're probably gonna see this a non-insubstantial amount of time. Yeah, I don't know. It's very annoying. Now let's get on to a German elite. So we saw the 169th Grenadier. Very powerful card. Now we get the Ace of Spades for Germany, which is a 7-credit 8/8 infantry. So we're seeing that there's actually like a lot of sort of like big dude cards in this expansion. And it's worth noting, 8 health is something that we just don't see a lot in the current meta. And, you know, 8 is meaningfully different than 6 or 7, even, to a lot of decks in the game right now. So just throwing that out there whenever we look at something with 8 health. Now, what is Ace of Spades? So Ace of Spades is a 7-credit 8/8 infantry with deployment, deal 3 damage to an enemy. So this can hit HQ. This can hit units. Doesn't matter what it hits. It can hit anything. And it doesn't have to kill it. It's not like a Pathfinder's or anything. It's just 7 credit, 8/8, deal 3 damage to something. And obviously you get to pick what it deals the 3 damage to. So it's like, okay, that on its own is not terrible, but it's not good enough to play. But it can become veteran at the start of your turn. So you play this, and then it goes to your opponent's turn, and they get a chance to deal with this 8/8 on the board. And if they don't, it veterans. And what's the veteran do? Well, the veteran is an 8/8, so it heals back any damage it might have taken. And it has guard. And it's in your support line. So you play Ace of Spades, it's in your support line, and then your opponent passes, and then it goes to your turn. And then it veterans, it becomes guard, and you can push it up to the front line if you want. And then the additional text on the veteran version of Ace of Spades is at the start of your turn, send all units to hand. Not just all enemy units, all units, including this. So it's a very bizarre card. There's like certain situations where like against wide decks, like frontline, this could theoretically be a very good card. But, like, also they're getting half-track back and they have suppress out the wazoo. But, like, let's just pretend we live in, like, Fairyland world where this triggers every time. So you play this, you deal 3 damage, you, like, take out their Hellcat or their M10 or their combat engineers or whatever the hell else you target. And then it goes to their turn, and then they get 1 turn to blitzkrieg you. And if they don't, it goes back to your turn, and your guy gets a guard. And then you do whatever else you do. And then it goes over to their turn, and now they have a chance to retreat it or suppress it or blitzkrieg and trade out with it. And if they don't, at the end of that second turn, all of their units get retreated. And also all of your units get retreated, which means you lose your guard. Yeah, so I just don't understand, like, the play pattern you're supposed to do with this card. This card just seems completely awful. Because, once again, retreating your own units, not that good. This one retreats all enemy units, which is good, but, like, it retreats all enemy units if you play this 7-cost card that your opponent doesn't kill or suppress for 2 turns. And that is not ever going to happen if retreating all of your opponent's units is a bad thing. But what also might happen is you play this, and then your opponent plays out a whole bunch of, like, deployment deal damage to the enemy HQ, or deployment add cards to your hand, or deployment gain health, or whatever other, like, powerful deployment effects that they have. And then they won't kill Ace of Spades, and now you are forced into returning all of their powerful deployment effects to their hand. So this card is absolute trash. It's never going to see play. It's just abysmally bad. But it's a German elite, and I'm fine with Germany getting an abysmal elite. That is fine. We can just move on to the next card. And the next card is the 178th Guard Rifles. It is a 2-credit 1/4 Guard infantry. Standard rarity. So 2-credit 1/4 Guard is bad. It is below rate. And the rate is something that is not played. Generally speaking, whenever I say something that is rate, the rate is typically not played. So 2-credit 1/4 Guard, trash. Destruction, add an 89th Infantry Regiment to your support line. And a fun little thing is 89th times 2 is 178th. But anyways, it adds an 89th infantry regiment to your support line, and the 89th is the 1/3 Guard. So it is a 2-credit 1/4 Guard destruction, summon a 1/3 Guard. So in total, it is a 2-credit 1/7 Guard that also has to be hit multiple times, and that is a lot better than a 2/5, or a 2-credit 1/5 Guard. So this is much, 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 much better than 5th Brigade. The issue is 5th Brigade is terrible. So where does this leave this card? I think its biggest comparison will be to Bryansk Irregulars, which is the 2-credit 0/6 Soviet Guard that is coming back with destruction, deal 3 damage to all units that have damaged this turn. And compared to Bryansk Irregulars, you are getting extra health. It is less vulnerable to something like a raiding brigade. And you are getting guaranteed damage on unit trades. So in a lot of ways, it looks a lot better than Bryansk. That being said, there's a kind of a maximum on the damage this is dealing. This is only dealing 1 damage at a time. You can't trade this into something to hit it for 3. So, I don't know. I think Bryansk Irregulars is better. Obviously, if they're going to get suppressed, you'd rather this get suppressed and then you have a 1/4 than Bryansk get suppressed and you have a 0/6. However, if either of these 2 drops are being suppressed, you're probably happy as Soviet control because you are playing a ton of suppressible units. So all in all, I think that people might experiment with this in Soviet control. This would also be very, very good with any type of Soviet bond, because this is a very sticky unit. I can't recall seeing any Soviet bond cards so far. Maybe there have been, but they sucked. But all the good Soviet cards don't have bond, and probably should. But yeah, all in all, I think people are going to experiment with this in Soviet control. Maybe if there's some sort of board-centric Soviet deck that really wants to stick units, because this is a very sticky unit, and unlike Bryansk, it is easier to play in an aggressive deck. You could see this being played in that, so it's a good card. It's a good card with a high potential of seeing play at some point in the future. I'm just not convinced that it's gonna like immediately slot into decks currently in the present. Then we have Motherland Calls, a card that makes the previous card we looked at entirely redundant. So Motherland Calls is a 3-credit Soviet elite. Okay, so what type of Soviet elite is this going to be? It's an order. Okay, Soviets have typically had pretty powerful orders, especially if they're AoEs. But they've also had some pretty buns orders if they are not AoEs. So what type of card is this one? Well, it's not an AoE. Motherland Calls is 3 credits. Add a Soviet unit with destruction in your deck to the support line. Give it Blitz. Destroy it at the end of turn. So it takes a random Soviet unit with destruction in your deck and puts it into the battlefield, and then you can play with it, and then it destroys it. So it gets destroyed at the end of your turn. So, what are the Soviet destruction units? Well, there's a number of them, and I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'm going to cover some of the heavy hitters. So, first of all, if you guys have been around for a couple of years, you probably remembered the 272nd. There's an 8-credit 6/6 infantry with destruction. Summon the IS-2, the 8/8 heavy armor 2 when retreated. Summon a copy. So, if you enjoy playing Classic, I'm sorry to tell you that your experience is now ruined, because all of those stupid Machines of War decks now have one extra way of trying to get a Stalin on turn 3. By doing Motherland Calls, you pull out the 272nd, it dies, and then you have a 1 operation cost 8/8 heavy armor 2 tank on turn 3. So that's stupid. But you can't do that in Standard, because 272nd is rotated. So what can you do in Standard? Well, you could try to do it with the 178th Guards we just looked at. Probably not doing that. Now, there is one very obvious thing that we're going to take a look at in a second here. But in the meantime, I'm just going to quickly pull up. There's the Yak 9, the playing with destruction, draw a card. That's fine if you're playing this with on a turn where you have the credits to attack with it. 3 credits, summon a Yak 9 from your deck. You attack with it, and then you draw the card anyways. Is pretty good. You can pull an Ilyushin. Obviously, the card from Air Supremacy, very, very good. Where you get to attack with it immediately, you trigger its destruction effect. That's usually like a high price suppression priority target in Soviets. There's a bunch of cards that are really, really bad, and like actively you can't play this if these cards are in your deck. For example, 97th Rifles, the 1-credit 1/2 destruction, add the 5/5 with destruction, draw 3 cards, deal damage, shuffle the 97th back into your deck. So the issue with Motherland Calls is it prevents you from playing a lot of cards if you want this card to not suck. And that includes Bryansk Irregulars, that includes the 178th Guards, that includes the 97th Rifles. That probably doesn't include Ilyushin. If you hit Ilyushin, it might be a lower value target. If you hit Yak 7, it might be a lower value target than you might be hoping for, but it's still going to be really good. Then some other options are the 36th Cavalry, the 6/6, well, the 3/3 deployment get +3/+3 destruction, summon the 2 3/3s. That one's probably not, like, that good, to be completely honest with you, for, like, constructed play. And then you have the T-34 destruction, draw T-34 from your deck, give it -2 cost. That one's, like, fine if you're playing a T-34 deck, but not good enough to make a T-34 deck. So all in all, it seems like, okay, if you're playing a Soviet air deck, you get your Yak 7s and you get your Ilyushins. Or, well, your Ilyushin. Problem is, it is bad with Chaika, and you probably don't want to cut Chaika to run this, and you probably don't want to play this if you are running Chaika. So, all in all, it seems pretty terrible. What are you supposed to use this card for? Or with this card with, I should say. Well, I'm just gonna, this is the one thing that I did to rearrange the order that these cards come in, because it's very important to look at this card next, and that is the IS-2 1944 Early. And that is the new 10-credit 7/7 elite tank for Soviets, 1 operation cost. It has Bond. It has Shock. It has Heavy Armor 2, which means it has 2 combat keywords, and it has Destruction, Add two 40-second rifles, give one guard and the other shock. And when it says add two 40-second rifles, it means to your support line. They just didn't include that in the text. And if you're confused as to what the 40-second rifles is, 40-second rifles is the Soviet 3-cost 3-4 ambush at the start of your turn. Fully repair this unit. So basically, when this dies, you get, and it's the way that these things typically work is you'll probably get it next to your HQ, and then the other one next to that on the right of the HQ. So you get your HQ guarded by a ambush guard. Fully repair this at the start of your turn unit. 2 combat keywords. And the other one, guarded by that, is an ambush shock 3-4. Fully repair this at the start of your turn. Also 2 combat keywords. So obviously, this on its own, played on turn 10, raw in your deck, is pretty mediocre. Like, it's a big guy, but, like, it doesn't have blitz. It has bond, which could be a bit of an issue. Your opponent has the opportunity to suppress it, and then you don't even get the dudes off of it. Even if they don't suppress it, like, shock heavy armor 2 for 10 cost, just compare it to the T-34 that has infinite shock and can't be suppressed. This card is mediocre at best. Like, it's just a Timmy card for a Soviet control deck if you're playing it flat. But because 1939 apparently really likes credit cheating casino decks, they also printed Motherland Calls for this 2 elite combo where sometimes you play Motherland Calls on turn 3. If IS-2 is the only Destruction Soviet card in your deck and you haven't drawn it yet, you get to pull it out on turn 3. And then you don't have the credits to attack with it, but it's going to die at the end of turn. And then on turn 3, you get a 3-4 guard ambush and a 3-4 shock ambush guys on the board. And that's very, very good on turn 3. Or you can do it on turn 5 if you want to risk 2 more chances of drawing this card, and on turn 5 you play it, and then you get to attack with this because it has 1 operation cost, and then you can hit something for 7, and then you pull out the 2 3-4s. So, obviously, that's a very stupid combo, and if you've learned anything about playing this game, you know that Kards has a huge Timmy player base, so you better believe that you're going to see Motherland Calls into the IS-2 all the time on ladder. Is it going to be good? Probably not, because you do have to make so many cuts from your Soviet deck. You got to cut the 97th, you got to cut the Bryansk, you got to cut, if you want to play the new guy, the 178th. And, like, do you want to make these cuts from Soviet control? Probably not. To, like, hit this, like, you know, chance of Motherland calling out, like, some guys. But, like, if you hit it, it's not game end, and it's not, like, quite cheating out at 272nd in the pre-suppressed meta. But, like, it's pretty bad if they get it. Like, if your opponent gets this against you, you're probably going to lose. Especially if you're playing any type of aggro or board-centric mid-range deck. Against control, it's going to be impactful, but, like, not as impactful. But yeah, no, this is a monstrous combo that is really stupid, and I am not a fan of, because Motherland Calls is a mediocre card without IS-2, and IS-2 is a mediocre card without Motherland Calls, and together it is a, like, combo that requires 2 elites, and you build your deck around it so that, like, 50% of the time you can get a stupidly crazy board advantage on turn 3, and 50% of the time you have a completely dead card in your hand and a 10-cost bad card in your hand. Not a big fan of this. Obviously, you could play this with, like, return to, or add on top of your deck stuff to, like, try to still use Motherland Calls if you draw them both, but that makes your deck even worse, and yeah. I don't... Or you could risk playing other destruction effects and have the Motherland Calls hit IS-2 not be a guaranteed thing on turn 3, but then that makes the deck less consistent. And I just hope so badly that this is not good enough to just play these 2 cards as a package in a Soviet control deck that you are otherwise not changing how the deck works. Like, if you just play 3 Bryansks, and, well, maybe you cut Bryansk, but, like, if you just play a deck with, like, a Yak 7 and a 97th and the IS-2, or maybe screw the Yak 7, or Yak 9. I think I've been saying Yak 7 this entire time, but I think it's the Yak 9. if you just play 97th, you are largely guaranteed to have a destruction unit in your deck at all times for the rest of the game, which means it's just a 50-50 to hit it. Now, obviously, if you keep Motherland Calls in your opening hand, and then on turn 3 you play Motherland Calls, and you hit a 1-2 that then dies and draws a card, you just played 3 credits, draw a card, and that is terrible. Absolutely terrible. But 50% of the time you hit the IS-2, and then you get a massive board advantage and you win. And then later in the game, even if you draw the IS-2, you can use Motherland Calls to fish out the 5-5 version after the 97th dies. If you draw the 97th, then that's going to draw you 3 cards, or you just pull out the 97th to draw a card if you need to cycle. But yeah, the more I talk about it, the more I think that, oh no, this might be... You have to cut Bryansk. I don't think you can do 3 Bryansks and 97th and IS-2 and then run Motherland Calls. So, I think Bryansk is probably good enough that you don't run that combo, but it's going to be good enough that, like, people are going to cut Bryansks to run this stupid combo anyways, even if it has a slightly negative impact on their win rate, they're going to do it because 50% of the time you get to ruin your opponent's life. Well, I guess even less than 50% of the time, but Cards players love the chance to ruin their opponent's lives. So let's move on from these cards and get to another Polish card. So maybe this one doesn't suck. So it's a 4-credit 5-4 infantry. So suboptimal stats for cost. It's Exile to Soviets. So you could consider this a Soviet card, if you will. And it says deployment, get the combat keywords of a target unit. So you target a unit on either side of the battle, anywhere on the battlefield, and you gain its keywords. So, obviously, this is supposed to fit into the keyword soup deck if you're the Soviet, if you're playing it in Soviets, and if you're playing it in Poland, it's a bad card. And in the Soviet keyword soup deck, which I am still yet to be convinced is not a terrible deck, you get to play this very mediocre card that does not particularly help the deck. Because, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to, like, turbo buff, like, you're going to play 4 copies of the Give It unit a combat keyword it doesn't already have on a unit that has 3 combat keywords. Like, you're going to play it on your Kirketis, and you're going to get your Kirketis to have all 7 combat keywords, and then you play this, and it's a 4-credit 5-4 ambush, shock, blitz, smoke screen, heavy armor 1. There's some other ones that I'm probably forgetting. And you get all of that guard, and it's just not that good. Like, if you played that on turn 4, that would be incredible. But, like, playing it on turn 4 is going to be really hard. The best, like, use case of this card is you play Kirkenis on turn 3. So on turn 3, you play a 4-4 ambush shock guard, and then they don't kill it because it's an insane unit. And then on turn 4, you play 2nd Infantry on the Kirkenis to get a 4-cost 5-4 ambush shock guard to go alongside it. That's like the one use case scenario. But that's not consistent enough to be played in a competitive, viable deck. But I'm also sure that you're probably going to, like, have your life ruined at least once as a Jaguar player, where your opponent does turn 3 Kirkenis, turn 4 2nd Infantry to get a slightly bigger Kirkenis. And that's going to be stupid. But yeah, all in all, pretty trash card. Yeah, not a lot else to say about this. Then we move on to Finland. And this is another example of Finland can't get a bad card and Poland can't get a good card, because Finland gets Coastal Battalion 7. It is a 4-credit 2-5 infantry with ambush and blitz. So this is a 2 combat keyword unit. And also, ambush and blitz, the ambush doesn't really matter a lot. The blitz is fine, but it's a 2-5. You're probably not going to be blitzing this a lot. But the passive effect on this unit is the best one we have seen for the combat keyword type deck, and that is units you deploy get +1/+1 for each combat keyword they have. So now suddenly all of your blitz ambush guys come down with +2/+2 if this guy can stick on the board. Your Kirkenis comes down as a 7/7, which is insane. And suddenly the cards that it just makes a lot of cards a lot less bad, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Is this good enough to make the combat soup deck work? I remain thoroughly unconvinced, but I think it's enough to solidify Finland as probably the best ally if you are going to commit to the full combat soup package. We saw the other one, like the gain health shock guard guy for Finland had if you have 2 or more combat keywords, and that one didn't really impress me too much. This one does impress me a bit more. This one's much better than that 3-cost 2/5 Finnish card we saw, or the Soviet 2-cost or 4-cost 2/5 give a unit when you deploy it a combat keyword that it doesn't already have. But yeah, the issue is you're just playing a lot of 4-cost guys that don't do anything until you play more units, and Soviets does not have the time to be doing that. Like, you play this on turn 4, and then your opponent's just gonna kill it. And if you wait until turn 7 to play this like with a Kirkenes, it's like, great, you played a 7/7 with a lot of keywords and a 2/5 that buffed the 7/7 and is threatening to buff other stuff, but it's like, it's turn 7 in modern day cards. They're gonna like suppress the Kirkenes and then trade off Coastal Battalion, or they're going to kill you. I don't know. It's a very good card for a deck that I don't think is going to be good. Moving on, we have Exposed, a 1-credit Soviet order, standard rarity, and it says costs 1 less if you control a US unit. So if you control a US unit, this is a 0-cost order. This is kind of a bizarre text to have at the front of a card. There is a similar text on a card back in the day that I think had its text changed at some point, but either way, I don't think it's in standard. It was some Soviet bomber. But this is just a type of keyword or a type of text that we haven't seen in a very long time in cards, and that is things costing less if you control a different, or having an extra effect if you control a unit of not the nation that the card is printed for. So if you control a US unit, this costs 0. And what does it actually do? It deals 5 damage to a unit, and that is any type of unit, not just ground unit, if it has no combat keywords. This is a very difficult card for me to evaluate. I think it's bad, because there's just enough units that have some combat keywords where you don't want a card that is not guaranteed to be able to do anything. And a lot of the cards I feel like that don't have combat keywords but are important to kill have 6 health, and then this just doesn't finish them off. And like, in a world where there's Rush and Extended Barrage and Bloody Sickle, this just seems worse than all of those things. So let's discuss it a little bit further. The issue with this card is no combat keywords means it can't hit any unit with Guard, it can't hit any unit with Blitz, and that's already like half of Control's units and half of Aggro's units. It can't hit anything with Ambush, and that's like half of the cards printed in this expansion. It can't hit anything with Shock, that's like half of units printed in the last year of cards, and it can't hit anything with Smokescreen, which is bad because Smokescreen units are typically, if your opponent is playing a Smokescreen unit, it's typically because it's powerful and you want to be able to remove it with orders before it loses Smokescreen. And then obviously there's like, it can't hit anything with Heavy Armor, which is again important to be able to target with orders. Like, there's things that it can hit. Like, you know, Sabe doesn't have any combat keywords. Tardau doesn't have any combat keywords. Sherman doesn't have any combat keywords. There's a lot of things that don't have combat keywords. But there is, like, I don't know, you don't want a card that works against, like, 25% of your opponent's deck. You want a card that works against 100% of your opponent's deck, or at the very least, like, 80% of your opponent's deck. So, unfortunately, I think this card is going to fall by the wayside. You can combine it with Suppress, because Suppress removes all combat keywords, but, like, I don't know, there's a card that's, like, Destroy a Suppressed unit, I think, that Finland has, if I remember correctly, and no one's ever played that. So, yeah, this card is, unfortunately, pretty bad. Also, the cost 0 if you control a US unit is just bizarre, since US and Soviet don't really seem to have any synergy together with what cards they've gotten in this expansion. So yeah, we're just gonna move straight on to Spars. It is a US 1-cost order. This one is a limited rarity, and it says choose one, draw the top unit of your deck, or give the top unit of your deck Ambush and Shock, but it remains on top of your deck. So, as we kind of discussed with the Finnish card, 1 credit, give a unit Ambush and Shock is probably good if it's giving it to a unit on board. 1 credit, give a unit Ambush and Shock. Like, if this was 1 credit, give a unit Ambush and Shock, like target unit that you control, it probably wouldn't see play. But this is 1 credit, give it a unit Ambush or Shock. on top of your deck, so you don't even know what the unit is, and it's not in your hand, so or on board. So you have to play this, hope it hits a good unit, and then draw and then play that unit to get the ambush and the shock. So this is bad if you only look at the other part of the choose one. Now, the first part of the choose one is just 1 credit, draw the top unit of your deck. And that is incredibly powerful in combo decks. Combo decks are always looking for other ways to tutor out specific types of cards. So if you are playing a combo deck that requires like hitting a 2-unit combination, and you are just playing a deck with a load of orders, and then you play some spars, this is a way to fish out a unit from your deck. Now, obviously, there were other ways to fish out units from your deck, like Atlantic Convoy, or Arctic Convoy, sorry. But that's a Soviet card. This is a US card. This just like gives combo decks more flexibility on what types of cards that they run with other ally nations. Now, if you run this outside of a combo deck, it's just 1 credit draw unit, and that's probably not good enough to see play in a real competitive deck, unless, again, you are a combo deck and you are intentionally trying to thin out your deck for a reason. So this is an incredibly good combo card for one half of the card text. The other half of the card text is unusable, and I don't know what combo that you are playing this in, but all in all, it's an utterly trash card outside of a combo deck for one of the 2 choose one effects. And that's kind of disappointing when you have a choose one card where there is a clearly best option. Yeah, and that is very much the case here. Then we have a 1 credit British order, which is Home Guard. So it's a 1 credit order with bond. And it says deal 2 damage to target unit. So that can hit friendly, that can hit enemy. 1 credit, deal 2 damage is about on rate. And it can hit anywhere on the field, so that is actually above rate, especially for a standard. So good card. Unfortunately, it has bond, which makes it bad, but it has the additional text, add a garrison to your hand. And the garrison is, of course, they came out in Naval Warfare, I want to say. Maybe they came out before. Maybe they came out in Blood and Iron, honestly. Yeah, I think they came out in Blood and Iron. But they are the 1 credit 0/3 guard. If this unit wasn't attacked at the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. So basically, this is just supposed to be another card for the British Bond aggro deck, because you're playing out a whole bunch of 1-drops. You always have units on board. You play Home Guard as a cheap way of like dealing damage to an enemy unit early to try to maintain board control, and then it gives you another cheap British card to play on the board to turn off all of your bond stuff and also start slowly chipping away at your opponent's HQ. So this is just like a full-on board flood type deck. I'm not super convinced that this card will be good in the deck, but I'm also not, like, you might just like throw in everything, and this included. This card having bond seems like a very big issue to me if you fall anywhere behind, because you don't want too many bond cards in this deck. And then also just the payoff for playing this is pretty low. And with a lot of the cards in this deck being standards, I feel like you're going to be at a full deck very quickly, and I'm not sure you're going to have room for Home Guard. Then we have the Middlesex Regiment, which is a 1 credit 1/3 guard, which is already a stat line on its own. A 1 credit 1/3 guard is a real card that exists in this game. But because we are in 2025 and this is a British card and a special, it says deployment, add a garrison to your hand. So it's same thing, it adds the 0/3 guard to your hand, but this is a 1/3 guard without bond. And this card is absolutely excellent for the bond deck, because this is a 1 credit card you can play on turn 1 with 3 health, so it's hard to remove. It has guard, so that's just fine. Like, guard is not a bad keyword to have on this unit. And it doesn't have bond, but it's going to stick around to deactivate all of your future bonds. So on turn 2, if you play 2 1-cost bond cards, or on turn 2 you play a 2-cost bond card, or whatever, this is just a very good way of like completely negating bond at any point. And if you draw later in the game, it's 2 more British units to play out over 2 turns, and to play around board clears, to just have more units that could potentially be bondable. And then honestly, if this deck has like enough card draw, I do kind of wonder if you play like Rural Britannia in this deck, just because, like, I don't know, it seems like this deck is just going to have a lot of British units on board. But you probably don't need it with the Mustang and the +3/+3 to a bond unit in your hand, and the Valentine Blitz. But also this is an infantry, so this works really well for enabling Valentine, which is if you played a British infantry last turn, gain Blitz. So yeah, all in all, this is just a card that's going to be really, really good in the Bond deck. Unlike most of the other cards we've seen in the Bond deck, this one is probably pretty good outside of the Bond deck. If you're just playing British control, if there's a very aggressive meta, you're probably perfectly happy playing Middlesex Regiment. Because you just play it out on turn 1, you're not doing anything else on turn 1 otherwise. It's a 1-3 guard, it trades out with cavalry plus something else. And then also it adds another 0-3 guard to your hand, which again, probably not going to have like almost any impact, but even if it's just 1 credit, heal 3 because your opponent has to kill it. It's beneficial. So all in all, this is just a very, very good card. Then we have another British card. This is a Bomber, limited rarity, 4 credit, 3/4, 2 operation cost. Deployment, deal 3 damage to an enemy unit if you deployed a British infantry last turn. And this is just a really weird card. So, it's not playable in Britain Air. I know it's an air unit, but it's not playable in Britain Air, because Britain Air is just simply never going to be playing that many British infantries where you're consistently triggering this, and if you're not triggering this, this is an abysmal card. If you are triggering this, this is a pretty good card. Not amazing, but pretty good. So then it comes to, okay, well obviously there is the Britain aggro deck with a bunch of Bond stuff. Do they want this card? And the answer is, like, probably, because it just has very good synergy with the deck. You're very consistently going to be able to trigger the deployment effect on this, and it gives them just a slightly larger unit to play, something that's going to have a big tempo swing on the turn it comes down. So, like, I do think you play this in the Bond aggro Britain deck, but it's just a very bizarre card, because it doesn't seem to fit the theme of the rest of the deck, like, at all. It doesn't have Bond, it doesn't do anything with Bond. It is just a card that does stuff. I don't know. It's just like a somewhat vanilla unit to support this archetype. And like again, you probably play this in the archetype, at least like maybe 1 or 2 of them or something. But I don't know. It's just a very weird card to put in the archetype. But I'm not going to complain too much, because something that has been the bane of a lot of new archetypes pushed by 1939 in the past is they'll get, like, a special that's really powerful for the archetype, and then, like, maybe 1 standard that's, like, the sort of default card you run in the deck, and then, like, 1 limited that's, like, not so good, and, like, that's the package. And it's like, that's not enough to make a deck. You need more cards. And I suppose in this case, they're giving Britain aggro just more cards to choose from. So it makes Britain somewhat one-dimensional, this expansion, but hey, at least it does give people some choice in how to build Britain aggro, which is obviously being pushed very hard. And I do think you'll probably choose to run this. There's like a world you could play this in, like, Britain control, but I just feel like you never played enough British infantries consistently enough to play this card, but maybe I'm wrong. If it was 4 damage, absolutely you'd play it, but 3 damage is slightly less impactful. This is not killing 4 health things. This is primarily killing 2 health and lower things. I mean cost. Like, most 4-cost units have 4 or more defense, and even 3-cost units typically have 4 or more defense at this point. It's primarily killing 2-drops and 1-drops. And Britain control can do better. So let's move on to the Polar Bears, another British Bond infantry standard card, 2 cost. So again, we are hitting critical mass on just the number of cards you can play, but you're not just going to play all of them in a deck, because then you have no card draw, and you just, like, if you don't win on board by, like, turn 3, or you're not winning on board by turn 3, then your deck just starts playing out these really crappy guys. So what does the Polar Bears do? So it's a 2 credit, 1/3 Bond Fury. So we got another Bond Fury card. So again, this anytime you see a Bond card, remember it could very easily come down with +3/+3. So this very easily could come down as a 4/6 Fury unit for 2 credits as early as turn 4. And then it has the added effect of deployment gets +1/+1 for each British infantry you deployed last turn. And now, if we go back a couple cards, Middlesex starts to look really, really good, and Home Guard starts to look a little bit more tempting if you want to use it with the Polar Bears, because you can basically do turn 1, play like the 1-drop, turn 2, Homefront, push the 1-drop, turn 3, Middlesex, 2 garrisons. Turn 4, you play down the polar bears, and it gets +3/+3 without even having to use the African regiment. And then, yeah, this is just another way to continue to snowball with this card and this deck. Even if you only get +1/+1 on this, like even if you only played a single British infantry last turn, 2 credit 2/4 Fury, not terrible. Not great, but not terrible. And if you played 2, then you're happy. Like, basically, you're happy with this if you played 2 or more in a turn. The question is, how consistently are you going to be able to do this? Do you want to run 4 polar bears to try to increase the odds of you being able to play this out on, like, turn 3 or 4 for additional stats? Or do you run, like, 2 of them because you're not going to be able to consistently get a lot of them buffed? So a lot of, again, interesting deck building questions to be posed when it comes to the aggro bond deck. Then we get to this card. This card kind of annoys me. So let's talk about why. So this is the 573rd Rifles. It is a Soviet standard rarity card. Standard rarity. So it is a 3 credit 2/3 infantry standard rarity. So obviously, absolutely abysmal stats for cost. However, it has Blitz and Bond, still abysmal stats for cost, even with those 2 keywords, because Bond is negative. And it has Destruction. Add 2 16th Rifles to your support line. And 16th Rifles, for those who do not know off the top of their head, is the 1 cost 0/1 Soviet infantry with smokescreen, and at the start of your turn get +1/+1. It's the ultimate snowball card. It's like permanent mobilize on a 0/1 smokescreen body. So 16th Rifles does not see a lot of play. If Soviet aggro was an archetype, you'd probably see 16th Rifles see some play, because you play it out on turn 1, and then on turn 2 it's a 1/2. Okay, that's fine, you're probably not doing that, but on turn 2 you play a 2-drop, and then on the start of your turn 3, it's now a 2/3. And it's like, okay, you're still probably not pushing that up. You attack with a 2-drop, you play another 2-drop. On turn 4, it's a 3/4. And maybe you push it up at that point, 3/4, not anything special, but again, you played it for 1 cost. And this is Destruction, add 2 of them. So this is Destruction, play 2 1-cost cards. And also, the 16th Rifles is a special. So this is a standard rarity with Destruction, play 2 1-cost special cards. And suddenly, the underwhelming stats and the bond on this do not seem anywhere near as bad, because the value you are getting out of this card is absurd. Now, obviously, this is meant to support a ground-based Soviet aggro deck. Doesn't necessarily have to be Soviet main if you want to just throw in Soviet ally, to just help snowball on the board. You just want to get like a ton of guys, because this is a 3-cost 2/3 with Destruction summon 2 additional dudes. That is a lot of cards generated out of a single card. And this is a standard, and you'll probably want to run 4 of them in that type of deck. Now, the question is this type of deck going to be good? Now, we've seen the other sticky unit. This is a very much an aggro card. You're not going to play this in control. But we saw the 178th, a bit earlier in this video, the 2 credit 1/4 summon the 1/3. So that, combined with the 573rd, are 2 cards that are very, very sticky, and that was a limited. This is a standard. So that's 7 incredibly sticky Soviet units. And what I mean by sticky is that they're going to stick around on the board a lot. They are very difficult to remove. So they are like guaranteeing you at least some board presence. And board presence and sticky units are very, very powerful. Now, again, I don't know what Soviet main deck wants that at the moment. I don't know if we're going to get more stuff in this expansion to support it, or if they're going to sit around on the back burner until next expansion, where they're going to suddenly pop off. So I'm not saying that this card is going to see it play immediately. Like, I'm not convinced that this is fast enough to want to play in, like, Soviet aggro. In terms of, like, Japan ally, or Japan main Soviet aggro. But if any sort of slightly slower, maybe a respite deck, or just go very, very wide Soviet aggro tempo deck, this is going to be a cornerstone of that type of deck. So again, You'll probably not see a lot of this card, but know that this card is crazy, and there's very possible that this card will be a cornerstone of a busted deck in the future. Then we have a Soviet 740th Rifle Regiment. It is a 6-cost, 5/6 infantry, limited rarity, has ambush and bond, and it has deployment effect, develop, Arctic Convoy, Burning Sky, or the Hammer. So what it means by develop here, it means you play it and you will be offered Arctic Convoy, Burning Sky, or the Hammer, and you pick one of them. And then they're just through the develop keyword on that. We've seen this type of card before where it's like choose one and then it offers you 2 cards. This is basically it offers you 3 cards and you pick which one you want and it adds it to your hand. It doesn't play it immediately. So this is just like the ultimate like value card. You play this really slow, big, dumb guy, and then you get to pick whichever card to develop into your hand that is best suited for this matchup. If you're playing against an air deck, you take the Burning Sky. If you're playing against, if you're like behind on board, you take the Hammer. Or if you need the card draw, you take the Arctic Convoy. This guy is an absolute piece of trash. This card sucks. This card is like abysmally bad. You'll never see it. It's not good. It's way too slow. I don't even know why this has Bond. Ambush needed to say Guard. And even then, if this card didn't say Bond and the Ambush said Guard, you'd still not play this card. But at least it would be better. Yeah, this card's bad. And it's also going to kickstart the start of each of the nations are going to get a similar type card where you get a pretty bad card that develops one of 3 cards to play. So yeah, again, this one sucks. Then we get one last card for this video, and that's going to be a Soviet special order called Persian Corridor. And it says, give a friendly British or US unit destruction, trigger all destruction effects of your Soviet units. So this is kind of a confusing card. But basically how this works is you have to give a British or US unit that you control, and you give it a destruction effect. Sticking with me? So this is a Soviet order that requires you to control a British or US unit, and then you give it a destruction effect, and the destruction effect is trigger all of the destruction effects of your Soviet units that you control and are on board. So if you control a British or a US unit, and then you control a bunch of Soviet units with destruction, you play Persian Corridor on the British or the US unit, and then you trade it away, and then it triggers all of the destruction effects, and you can get a ton of value. This card's awful. I don't even begin to understand what archetype this is supposed to support. It requires you to have a specific ally to play the card, and then also it requires you to have a specific archetype to play the card, and it's technically you could play it in Soviet ally, but you want to trigger the destruction effects of your Soviet units, which means you want a lot of Soviet units, so you're probably playing this in Soviet main. So then it's like Soviet US have lots of Soviet destruction effects. Like, I don't know, this seems like a silly amount of setup for like next to no payoff. Yeah, this card sucks. Not a whole lot else to say. That is going to be it for this video, which is again part 3. Subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss part 4. And keep an eye on my Twitch down in the description, because I very well will likely be streaming over on my Twitch channel in the afternoon tomorrow, Thursday, November 27th, which is the day that Homefront comes out. So, sometime in the later afternoon EST, I will be streaming over on my Twitch channel and showing off some gameplay, and over here on YouTube, I will be releasing part 4 sometime on Thursday morning. So stick around for all of that. Subscribe, get notifications, all of that fun stuff. And once again, like always, have a discussion down in the comments. Let me know if you agreed with me, if you disagreed with me. Did I miss anything? Do you see anything that is concerning? Do you see anything that's really, really, that you're excited to play with? All of that down below, and I will see all of y'all in the next one, part 4, coming in probably about 12 to 16 hours.